The Rat Pack's charisma and charm have captivated the world for decades, but there are stories behind the glitz and glamour. Now, one of Hollywood's most beloved icons, Ernest Borgnine, has decided to speak out about the mysterious Dean Martin. What was Martin really like behind the suave persona? What were their secrets that only Borgnine knew? Get ready to discover the untold truths about a friendship that shaped an era of Hollywood like no other. This revelation promises to change everything you thought you knew about the King of Cool. First, let's talk about Ernest Borgnine and Dean Martin's relationship. Borgnine is a great actor, and he meets Dean Martin on the set of From Here to Eternity, an epic movie. He probably thinks it's going to be a musical since Frank Sinatra is in it. Borgnine tells Martin, "I'm walking off the set." And Martin says, "I'm leaving." Dean Martin walks on stage and tells the crowd, "Now there's an actor." That's when he realizes it wasn't just a compliment. Dean meant it. But let's go back and look at who this Dean Martin guy was. Born Dino Malachi, this kid from Ohio had a rough start. He spoke Italian at home and struggled to learn English in school. He even dropped out. Can you believe it? But sometimes the best stories come from people who break the rules. He tried everything, boxing, bootlegging, you name it, and even called himself Kid Crochet in the ring. Finally, he found his groove in music. He started singing, got noticed, and was on his way, but then World War II happened and he was drafted. Luckily, he was released early and he went back into show business. That's when Jerry Lewis came along. Dean Martin, the smooth operator, meets Jerry Lewis, the wild card comedian, at a nightclub, and sparks fly. As they say, the rest is history. Dean and Jerry, a smooth singer and a master of physical comedy, put on a musical comedy show together. They were like fire and ice, the perfect match. Their debut at the 500 Club in Atlantic City wasn't exactly a standing ovation. The audience seemed more confused than amused. The club owner, a guy named Skinny D'Amato, threatened to, they were told they would be kicked out if they didn't improve. But these guys didn't give up. They went back to the drawing board, and boy did they come back with a bang. Their next show was pure magic. Jerry would interrupt Dean Maidong, sending him into a hilarious chase across the stage. There was also a part where Jerry, dressed as a clumsy waiter, would crash Dean's performance, dropping plates and generally causing chaos. The audience went crazy, and they quickly became very popular. They were the talk of the town and even got a spot on the Ed Sullivan Show. They knew they had to take things to the next level, so they hired some great writers to help them work on their act. Things were looking up when they signed a lucrative radio deal with Paramount and made $775,000. It was a fortune at the time. But success didn't come without problems. Dean and Jerry started a fight because Dean thought Jerry was taking too much attention away from him. Too much slapstick and not enough music. He wanted to try new things, but their contract with Paramount limited them. That's when things went badly. The story was very sad. Imagine being on stage with your best friend. The crowd's going crazy, and then all of a sudden your face is erased from the cover of a magazine. That's pretty much what happened to Dean Martin and his comedy partner Jerry Lewis. Lewis thought these two were great together, but Dean's friendship with Jerry took a big hit when he felt completely ignored by Jerry. It all started in 1954 when they did this crazy, over-the-top three-ring circus act that got them a magazine spread. But guess who was mysteriously missing from the photo? Dean. Dean was furious, and he told Jerry he had had enough of Paramount and Jerry, and when his contract finally expired, he hightailed it out of there. People laughed and said Dean would fail because he wasn't with Jerry, but Dean, bless his heart, proved them all wrong. He went solo and focused on his singing career, and boy could he sing. That's Amore, Everybody Loves Somebody, and those songs were huge hits. But Dean wasn't happy being a singer. He also wanted to be a movie star, so he tried acting, but let's just say his early acting career was a bit of a mixed bag. Then came The Young Lions, a war movie released in 1958, became a big hit and put Dean back in the spotlight. He was seen with Hollywood royalty like John Wayne, Ricky Nelson, and others, and he was even nominated for a Golden Globe. From then on, Dean was on fire. He starred in a lot of movies and even produced some himself. He became a legend and an icon. And don't forget the Rat Pack. Dean, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and Dean. They were party animals who sang, joked, and charmed their way through every show. Las Vegas had never seen anything like it before the Dean Martin Show. Think of it as the ultimate chill TV show. Dean, who looked great in a tux, would chat with guests, make a few inappropriate jokes, some might say too many, and generally have a good time. It was a huge hit, even though NBC was constantly watching him off screen. Despite his playboy image, he loved his wife and children. His friends say that even though he acted like a bit of a drinker on TV, he wasn't really that much of a drinker. Years later, Dean and Jerry finally made up. It was a touching moment for them. Things went smoothly after that, until something terrible happened to Dean. In March 1987, Dean Martin the Cunard lost his son Dean Paul in a plane crash. It was a real tragedy. Dean had a terrible accident while flying with the Air National Guard, and it really hurt him. He fell into a deep depression and turned to alcohol for comfort. His friend Frank Sinatra tried to cheer him up by taking him on tour, but it was like putting out a fire with gasoline. Dean was hooked on alcohol and never took a cigarette off. In 1993, they told him that all those years of smoking had caught up with him. Dean Martin had lung cancer and could have had surgery, but his stubborn heart wouldn't let him. He stepped away from the spotlight, spent time with his family, and slowly died on Christmas Day, 1995, aged 78. The world mourned his death, and even the Las Vegas Strip turned off its lights in his honor. From a kid who dropped out of school to a global icon, he quit the journey. We got to hear what happened between him and Borgnine in his own words, which gave us a glimpse into their friendship and showed us a side of Dean that went way beyond the suave image and the Rat Pack swagger. It turned out that Dino was a real friend and loyal guy who was more than just a pretty face. Now let's talk about Ernie. Born Hermes Ephron Borgnine, he grew up in a working-class family in Connecticut as the son of Italian parents. He did what any patriotic American would do after high school. He joined the Navy. When Woo hit, he was right back in uniform serving his country. After the war, Ernie was lost and didn't know what to do with his life. Ernest Borgnine quickly realized that he wasn't cut out for factory work. Luckily for him, his mom had a better sense of his talents and told him, "You're always making a fool of yourself in front of people. Why?" Most kids would roll their eyes, but Ernest had an epiphany at the kitchen table. It was like a light bulb went off in his head, and 10 years later, Grace Kelly gave him an Oscar. He started out at the Randall School of Drama in Hartford and then joined the Barter Theater in Virginia. During the Great Depression, people could trade things like apples and eggs for tickets, which made the theater a gem. His first role was in 1947. In State of the Union, he played a small role, but the audience loved him. He kept the momentum going in Tennessee Williams's The Glass Menagerie, where he played the gentleman caller and showed he could bring the drama. By 1949, he was ready for the big city. He made his Broadway debut in Harvey as a nurse, of all things. Then he went to TV, where his first job was on Captain Video and his Video Rangers. It sounds silly, but it was the start of a huge career. Soon enough, Hollywood called, and he got his first movie role in The Whistle at Eaton Falls in 1951. But it was his role as Nasty Sergeant Fatso Judson in From Here to Eternity that made him famous. Critics loved the movie so much that it won Best Picture, and Borgnine was no longer afraid to play the bad guy. He had a string of bad guy roles in movies like Johnny Guar. 1955, he starred in Marty as a shy but likable butcher, and everyone fell in love with him. The movie won a lot of awards, including the Oscar and a Golden Globe. He even won a Golden Globe in a British Academy Film Award ceremony. After his Captain Video days, he became a TV star in 1962 when he joined Mail's Navy, a sitcom about a group of troublemakers during World War II. Ernest played Quentin. In the show, McCabe played the stern but likable skipper who kept his misfit crew in line. The show was an instant hit, debuting in the top 30 and earning Borgnine an Emmy nomination. But after 4 seasons, the joke got old, and the show ended in 1966. Borgnine's career didn't slow down, though, and he was in a lot of movies over the next 30 years. He played Dutch in the western The Wild Bunch, which had a strong moral message. Borgnine later said that every movie should have a moral because back in the day the bad guys always got what they deserved. Now it seems like they're running the show. Preach Ernie and TV, oh, he ruled that too. Little House on the Prairie, Magnum P.I., The Love Boat, Touched by an Angel. You couldn't flip through channels without seeing his face after that. Borgnine became Hollywood's go-to guy for westerns, comedies, you name it, he did it all. Even in his later years, he kept working, appearing in the last episodes of Like the true legend that he was, Ernest Borgnine's career was legendary, and he never seemed to slow down. In 1983, he was back at Universal Studios, co-starring with Vincent in the hit TV show Airwolf, produced by Donald Belisario. After seeing him wrestle in an episode of Magnum P.I. in 1982, Borgnine said yes right away and took on the role of Dominic Santini, a likable helicopter pilot. The show was a big hit, but behind the scenes, Borgnine was working himself to the bone. The long hours and fights with his younger co-star could have worn anyone out. CBS canceled the show in 1986, giving Borgnine a well-deserved break, or so you'd think. Borgnine went to Namibia in 1989 to film Laser Mission with Brandon Lee. The movie came out in 1990 but didn't win any Oscars. By 1995, he was back on TV as the single guy who played Manny Cordoba, the world's most lovable doorman. Co-star Jonathan Silverman joked that Borgnine had more energy than the whole cast put together, being the first one on set and the last one to leave, and probably cracking jokes in between takes. In 1996, Borgnine showed his adventurous side in Merlin's Shop of. In this strange fantasy movie, he told a story about a cursed monkey toy that was stolen from Merlin. The movie didn't do well at first, but it eventually gained a cult following after being made fun of on Mystery Science Theater 3000. That same year, Borgnine got on a bus and traveled the country to meet fans and see the sights. His journey was the subject of a 1997 documentary called Ernest Borgnine on the Bus. Despite all of this, he still found time to visit VA hospitals as part of the National Salute to Hospitalized Veterans. By 1997, Borgnine was back in uniform and playing Rear Admiral Quentin McHale in Mel's Navy. He then gave the role and name to Tom Arnold, who played his son. A year later, he appeared in the comedy Baseball as a rich entrepreneur who was both silly and funny. Finally, he played Mermaid Man in SpongeBob SquarePants. As Barnacle Boy, Borgnine played a retired superhero who was loved by both kids and adults. After his death, Nickelodeon honored him by airing all of his Mermaid Man episodes, which is the sweetest thing. But Borgnine didn't stop there. In 2007, he starred in the Hallmark movie A Grandpa for Christmas, which was a heartwarming story of a grandfather reconnecting with his granddaughter. The movie won him a Golden Globe. At 90 years old, he was the oldest nominee ever, and he also found time to write his autobiography, Ernie, which was less of a memoir and more of a let's sit down and share some amazing stories book. In 2009, Borgnine played a husband watching his wife die in the last season of Breaking Hearts. His performance was so moving that it earned him an Emmy nomination, his first in almost 30 years. He starred in the show at age 92. In 2010, he ended his movie career in style with a cameo on Saturday Night Live with Morgan Freeman. He also had a fun cameo in the action movie Red and finished his last movie, The Man Who Shook the Hand of Vicente Fernandez, in 2011. Borgnine stayed busy, charming, and never lost his sense of humor or love for his fans. If anyone ever deserved the title Unstoppable, it was him. Ernest Borgnine and Dean Martin were two legends with very different careers, but both considered icons in their own right. Here's where it gets interesting. Actor Ernest Borgnine told a story that perfectly summed up Dean's charm. When Borgnine finished a scene on set, he overheard Martin point to him and say, "Now there's an actor. Look at Dean Martin, the king of cool, giving you a compliment like it's nothing." Borgnine was shocked. He had already admired Martin. Dean, hearing that kind of praise, let's say it made his week, maybe even his year. Borgnine later called Dean the most wonderful man and gushed about how easy it was to get along with him. Their instant connection turned into a lasting friendship, and here's the thing about Dean. He wasn't the type to steal the show, even though he was a meat star. He brought others up. In a world where egos and competition rule, Dean was the guy who showed others how to act. Dean Martin knew how to make people feel like $1,000,000 with a wink, a drink, and a talent for doing so. Let's raise a glass to that. Ernest Borgnine's memories of Dean Martin are more than just Hollywood stories. They show that a few kind words and a genuine heart can change a life. Borgnine had a front row seat to the real Dean Martin, and he was much more than just the smooth-talking, martini-sipping icon we saw on screen. Martin oozed cool, but behind Dean's suave exterior, he was as humble and funny as your neighbor who still mows their lawn. Borgnine loved to talk about how Dean wasn't just another famous person lost in the glitz. This guy was the real deal. He had a way of making you feel like you mattered. His kindness wasn't a show. It was who he was. And let's not forget that the man was generous to a fault. Do you need advice, a laugh, or just someone to have a beer with? Martin could tell a joke so sharp it could cut through the toughest of times. Borgnine would often say that Dean's wit was like the glue that held their friendship together. If he were going through life's ups and downs, he was the perfect person to make even the worst day feel a little less bad. But behind that constant smile was a man who carried his struggles that he rarely let anyone see. Just a few people, like Borgnine, got to know that side of him, which shows how close they were. Dean's superpower wasn't just his talent, it was his ability to stay human when everyone else around him screamed celebrity. His fans loved him, and his peers respected him, but it was his kindness that truly defined him. Borgnine saw all of it, the glamour, the humility, and the times when Martin would surprise you by being a normal guy with a big heart. Martin and Borgnine were real friends. They worked together, so they were friends. Borgnine's was the hard-working guy who took everything seriously, and Martin was the epitome of cool. The two couldn't have been more different, but they made it work. Their friendship wasn't just meant to last. It was based on trust, laughter, and an honesty that's hard to find even in Hollywood. Although Martin was famous, Borgnine's stories show that he was a good person who loved friends and family, and we all wish we could have had a drink with him. Borgnine and Martin had a friendship that you don't see very often, especially in Hollywood. They were there for each other through the good times and the bad. When Martin lost his son, Dean Paul Jr., in a plane crash, they were there through it all. There was Borgnine not just saying nice things, but really being there to help. He didn't try to fix it or use platitudes. He just showed up, probably with a strong shoulder. And friends sometimes buy each other a bottle of something strong, and when Borgnine hit a business slump or one of those "am I even good at this" moments we all have, Martin was there for him. Well, maybe not with pom-poms and cartwheels. He'd call to visit and tell Borgnine how talented he was and how much he meant to everyone who knew him. Basically, he was the guy who'd shake you by the shoulders and say, "Shut up, you're amazing." But their friendship wasn't just about serious things. These two knew how to laugh, and they loved the simple pleasures of hanging out. Their banter could have been a comedy show, and you can bet they made life on set a lot of fun. What made their friendship so special was how real it was. They saw past the Hollywood glitz and focused on who the other person was. There was no ego or fake smiles, just two guys who cared about each other. In a world full of photo ops and superficial connections, Borgnine and Martin's friendship was as rare as finding a clean car in Los Angeles after it rains. It is a reminder that even if you're famous and wealthy, the people who stick by you through good times and bad are what important. That's because when life or even just a bad round of golf happens, you need someone to laugh with you and maybe even pay for dinner.